We have Spencer Smith, who is the SVP of Strategic Growth, and we also have Carrie Otto, the Director of Experience Strategy, and they're going to be sharing with you how they're helping some of the best brands in the world overcome their personalization challenges and achieve measurable outcomes. So please welcome Spencer and Carrie to the stage.
Thank you all so very much for spending the afternoon with us here. We are so excited to be here at Think Summit 2026. But before we get into it, we thought we'd start with a quick question to sort of set the table here today. And that is, what if we told you that 93% of marketing leaders believe that AI is helping them accurately understand customer needs? I think we'd all say, well, yeah, of course. It makes a ton of sense, right? It's super transformative technology. But what if we also told you that in that same study, researchers surveyed the customers of those same marketers that lead those brands, and only 53% agreed that those brands are effectively delivering on their wants and needs, right? That's a 40-point gap in perception from what marketers believe the power of AI is enabling and the customer and the experiences that they are being delivered every day. That gap is not about capability, right? All morning we've heard about how transformative and incredible this technology is that we all have at our fingertips. It's really about connection. Brands are reaching customers every second of every day, but they're not meeting them where they are. And that's what our team at Bold Orange is charged with every day, and what we support our clients with, is helping provide an outside perspective to allow them to see what customers see from the outside in. So my name is Spencer Smith, and I lead strategic growth at Bold Orange.
And I'm Carrie Otto. I lead CX strategy for many of our enterprise clients.
And for some quick context, Bold Orange is a customer experience company. We are an agency that is focused on helping brands transform their experiences across the customer lifecycle. We're proud to work with some of the best brands in the world and helping them through these transformations. And we do that work through what we call by applying a CX lens. So we offer a clearer view of what is happening from across that customer experience and providing brands with a sharper focus on what to do about it. So we do that by understanding what the customer is actually experiencing, helping them see that reality of all of the journeys that they have firing, frankly, sometimes at the same time to the same customers, helping them decide what areas across that journey can we transform to drive greater impact on our business, and finally helping them act and truly activate on those opportunities that we find across the customer experience. We've got an integrated capability set at Bold Orange from strategy, activation, and analytics, creative and experience design, data technology, and AI enablement. We don't do this alone. We have some incredible partners, many of which are here today at this conference, notably Movable Inc., who we worked with for several years, and we're really proud of the partnership that we've built with them.
Awesome. So as we think back to that 40-point perception gap, we want to figure out how we can close that. We're not going to get it to zero overnight, but how can we make some meaningful progress so that we can both improve customer experiences, be relevant, and drive business results? So what we're going to talk about today are kind of 3 key moves that you can make as a marketer that help us make some progress on that perception gap. We want to make sure we're considering the full consumer experience, creating relevancy at scale, and finally connecting in the moments that matter. So let's start with a tough question. When was the last time you got out from behind your laptop or the walls of your organization and experienced your brand in the same way that consumers do? Walked into a retail store, signed up for something online. Okay, good, we've got some recency here. The reality is for a lot of marketers, it's been a minute. So we gotta figure out how we can make some meaningful progress here and get out from behind the scenes. And what we as marketers often see are things like campaign metrics through dashboards. We get together in a room and talk about how a campaign performed and what that review of performance might tell us what we do differently in the future. We're thinking about open rates and click-through rates and individual channels because that's what our job is. Back to the Chase presentation, right? What are we incentivized by? What are we measured by? And oftentimes we get kind of stuck in those lanes that we're used to. However, on the customer side, if we had visibility to see that they were seeing the exact same message across 3 channels within minutes of each other, would that be considered a helpful experience or a little bit crowded? What if they receive a generic promotion the day after they had kind of a tough conversation with their customer service team? What if they got a nurture series for a product they just bought? That's frustrating. That's why this gap exists. And so the reality is that a lot of customers don't experience isolated campaigns. In fact, they're having multitudes of interactions with our brands, and it's shaping the totality of their experience. So let us talk about a brand who we've recently helped kind of see this picture from the consumer's point of view. We work with Rakuten Kobo, and they are an e-reader service, and they serve millions of customers across a number of various different countries. And frankly, they had a very sophisticated CRM platform and some good personalization strategies running. But they also had the self-awareness to say, you know what, I think there's more we could be doing, better results that we could be driving. And so what they did is they asked us to help them apply the CX lens. And when we took a step back, we were able to kind of widen our aperture on what was actually happening inside of these campaigns. We looked at all of the touch points the brand had with consumers across their life cycles. And not just did they exist, but how effective are they at meeting customers' expectations? Then we looked at the journeys that were built inside of their CRM platforms, and we really wanted to see where are those journeys colliding potentially with one another, where are we competing for consumers in really particular moments, and what opportunities might come from that. And then finally, we helped them look at their MarTech and data and really just try to decide what are some capabilities that are under-leveraged, where might we have some connection points that we're currently missing because we don't have the right data pipelines built. So before we made a recommendation, we wanted to look at the experience from a holistic view. And what we saw was inside the platforms, if we were looking at them as marketers traditionally do, we saw active programs. We were showing up for customers in acquisition phases and retention and win-back strategies. We were launching personalization across a variety of our different campaigns. We were having good email and push campaigns running, and we were active in the early life cycle, which we knew was important. But when we widened the aperture and looked at it from the holistic view, we actually saw that there were so many journeys competing for customers at the exact same moments. So now they're getting a multitude of communications and touch points, and we're kind of confusing them with what we actually want them to do next. What's the true next best action? Their data was pretty fragmented, and that stopped them from being able to execute a lot of the personalization they wanted to. And they had some good things happening in both email and push, but they weren't integrated at all. And we found some opportunity to better serve people in these early life cycle moments. So coming out of this CX lens, or experiencing the entirety of the touch points and marketing communications from a customer's lens, really led to this output of the experience audit being a roadmap. Not where are we today and where do we need to be, but like what are some clear steps we can do to make some progress? What data pipelines do we need to build to better activate in some of these key moments that were identified during the lifecycle experience? How can we optimize those journeys more relevantly so that customer sentiment could improve? How can we orchestrate across channels, not just within them? And frankly, are there any technology integrations that needed to be added to the MarTech stack to really enhance that capability? And out of this audit actually came a recommendation for them to use Movable Ink, which they are now on their journey with Movable Ink as well. So this was kind of the first move for creating relevancy through the CX lens. I'll kick it to you, Spence.
Yeah, and the second move, typically, once you have a good understanding of what are the touch points that we need to introduce, transform, change, evolve, the second area of focus tends to move to what is the content that we need to create to show up in those moments in a relevant way. And the reality is that brands are creating more content than ever before. It's easier than ever to create content, but very few are creating true relevance. And there was a study done recently by McKinsey that showed that companies with a strong investment and sensibilities in design are outperforming their peers 2-to-1 in revenue growth. And I think the reason for this is you can have the best technology in the world, you can have the richest data sets, you can have the strongest strategy, but if the creative and the content isn't compelling, it isn't engaging, the entire thing is going to fall flat. So we're seeing some real investments in helping elevate the content to drive increased relevancy. And it really happens in two ways. The first is helping to design a design system that is built for scale. So to create that foundational infrastructure from a design standpoint, to leverage all of these incredibly powerful tools to build and create content at scale is incredibly important. And then the second piece is the content that sits within those design systems that ultimately creates true connection and relevancy with your customers. And we see that leading brands are really starting with the moment and not the message. Traditionally, a lot of marketers start with, what do we want to say to the customer today? The leaders are really stepping ahead to say, what are the moments we need to show up in, and how do we move them to the next stage of their journey? So we thought we'd bring this forward and sort of shed some light on this with a client that we're incredibly proud to support. We've partnered with Intuit TurboTax the last several years. Shout out to Nick Carvunas, I see you out there, Nick, for his presence in the keynote earlier today. But Intuit TurboTax, we've been helping them elevate their strategy, helping build a powerful design system that allows all of this at scale, and ultimately refining kind of the storytelling and the creative that we're bringing to life to transform that entire customer experience through their own channels. And a lot of that transformational work started with a design toolkit. So this has happened actually in a couple iterations as the brand has evolved, but really looking at how do we take the TurboTax brand and bring it to life through their digital channels in a way that is incredibly scalable. So looking at sort of all of the smaller sort of components of a design perspective to ultimately feed into what is a design system. So we created hundreds of modules in Figma that can be leveraged across their channels, across their tools, to create an incredible sense of consistency, but also the ability to just scale up content during that 4-month tax window that Nick talked about earlier today. That's incredibly tight. Modular architecture is sort of the foundation of these systems. We also think about channel native design, so thinking about RCS versus rich push versus email. What are the unique nuances? Thinking about things like dark mode showing up in relevant ways, even in sort of the customer's preference of how they want to view these communications. So really building that robust design system acts as the foundation. Now that is what makes scale possible, the system, but the content is what ultimately makes it matter to the customer. So let's talk about a few examples that bring this to life. We spend a lot of time thinking about how to move customers and guide them through a journey. So this is an example of how we're, during tax season, taking a lot of complexity and creating simplicity through that complexity. So we're leveraging data to show up exactly in the moment where that customer is in their own personal tax filing journey, but leveraging motion design and simple animations to guide them through that journey and meet them exactly where they are in that moment. But we don't only guide them, we also educate them. Tax filing is incredibly complicated for some people, and there's a lot of questions, right, as you move through that process. And we found the interesting insight that we discovered along the way is there's a large cohort of folks that spend Saturday morning specifically during tax season working on their taxes. I am personally one of them. And what we built around that insight was a nurture journey that fired on Saturday mornings in the moment where these folks are spending time doing their taxes to help educate them. And we call it the weekend tax talk. And you'll see here, this is just probably half of a communication and the level of personalization built within, but we're really helping meet them exactly where they are in their own status, like where they are in their filing journey, all of the information that we know about them to make it feel and seem as relevant as humanly possible, and ultimately teaching them along the way the sort of insights that are most relevant to them and what matters where they are in that journey. We also look beyond, certainly beyond email. We're looking at how do we meet folks in channels that their preferences tell us that they care or that they engage with most. And so this is an example of some of the rich push communications that we're delivering. And you'll see here again, pulling through that design system, the simple animations, but the nuance of this is because taxes are so personal, we have to make sure that we're getting it right. So sometimes someone may be expecting to receive a balance, in the sense, or sorry, expecting to pay a balance. They have a balance due, as we call it. And sometimes they may be expecting a refund. And we can't get that wrong. And so there's a lot of data that is powering this, but ultimately also how we show up in the communications to make that as relevant as possible. And it's not only a one-way conversation, right? We're always looking for opportunities to learn from our customers and further personalize the downstream experience for them. So this is an example of how we're using polling technology from Movable Inc. to ask questions about their personal changes in their life, right? So in this example, someone is saying, I am in buying or selling or refinancing a home. And so downstream, we're using that data to show up for them and show them what is going to be relevant for them this year as they think about their tax filing with that new reality. And all of these moments, and there are truly hundreds and hundreds of them across the series of tax season, but well beyond throughout the year, come together to really deliver relevancy for the customer and truly create award-winning customer experiences that we're incredibly proud to team up with Nick and his team on delivering every day.
Awesome, and those experiences can really only come to life in meaningful moments for customers when we have the right connections kind of behind the scenes, right? Not only creative that shows up in the moments, but the technology that's connected in ways that enables us to be there in those moments with people. So you've all probably made some pretty big investments in technology to make these sorts of personalized experiences happen, to build into these systems, to participate in these types of programs. But a lot of us are leaving a big percentage of that technology on the shelf. And a recent study by Gartner actually showed that only marketers like us are only often using 33% of the capability that we've bought inside of our MarTech stack, which means there's a lot of personalization that we're leaving on the table. There's a lot of moments we could be missing. There's places where we're trying to have multiple journeys show up for a consumer because of some trigger that happened. And so a lot of teams do some stuff, they get it live, and then they let it be, right? They let it run for a while because we don't have the time or the mandate or the resources to continue to build upon it. And that's the first part of the challenge. And the second part is that a lot of the customer data that we have sits upstream. We can't get it to a place where it's actionable inside of our technology platforms. It sits in Snowflake or Databricks or the data cloud platform, and it's really difficult for us to actually move that data in places in ways that we can actually get it activated. And so you have often captured this data, but how effectively are you activating on it? Coincidentally, the exact same number that you saw earlier, but different study, 33% of us are actually saying that we can activate our data effectively. When we get to the bigger enterprises, sometimes we have better data portability. Sometimes it gets even more complicated, like we heard with some of the challenges with different analytics teams, different structures, different processes. And so marketing operations can be a big challenge here to make this data active. And unfortunately, this just compounds the MarTech issue that we talked about earlier. And if we truly want to connect with customers in moments that matter, we have to solve for both of them. And this is where we come into play, right? The machines have the data. They can create these propensity models. They can tell us how likely somebody is, what their next best action, their next best product might be. But it's up to us to figure out how we can unlock more of that capability. We can do better than 33%. We can do better than 33% of our capabilities inside of these big, robust, extremely powerful platforms that we have at our fingertips. And we can do better than getting 33% of our data active. So to kind of close things out, we know that can sound overwhelming, right? Like, just connect your data, just buy the right technology, and everything will come to life. Oh, and build a creative system. Like, these things don't happen overnight, but if we want to close that 40-point percentage gap, we got to figure out how to make some small steps forward. And so our recommendation is to pick a key moment, figure out the data process, figure out how to get the platforms ready to activate in this key moment that you've selected because it's meaningful to your business, prove the value, and then scale from there. So we work with a large veterinary care system. A lot of us have pets at home probably, but let's say we see a moment where a pet has missed their second annual visit that they're supposed to come in for. Our data system knows a heck of a lot about that pet, right? What breed they are, how old they are, what their visit history looks like, their weight, maybe what treatments are due. But a lot of us would just send a generic re-engage email, right? Like, hey, you missed your appointment, come on back. That's only going to go so far. Where we can make this really sing is if we can say, oh, this is a 3-year-old golden retriever. He's due for heartworm. And here's your local veterinary clinic. Here's the number. Here's a place where you can click and schedule this appointment. And guess what? If you come in the next 2 weeks, we'll make sure that these additional services are included with your visit. So we pick this moment. We think about how we can connect the care schedule and the pet information from these 2 different sources on the back end to be ready for us to activate that content in a more personalized way than just the generic re-engage email we might have sent previously. We show the lift in incrementality by getting that pet back in for another visit, and they're more likely to renew their subscription plan. And then we can make a business case to continue to scale that process. So as we do that for the next best moment, we can start to close this 40% or 40-point percentage perception gap. Whew, tongue twister. If we take a step back and we consider the customer's experience, we create relevance at scale, and we connect in the moments that matter.
And just to round us out, really appreciate everyone's time today. As an agency partner of Movable Inc., we offer something called the Personalization Blueprint. So this is a very sort of simple, structured assessment to help brands understand where the biggest opportunities lie and help them move and make progress against unlocking those opportunities for the future. So we'll be here the next couple days. Would love to connect and really appreciate you joining us here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.